Okay, so welcome to our first affinity group of feedback. We're glad to have you with us today. Today's resources can be found in the Bentley link. So Brandy's going to drop that in the chat and you can get the Bentley link, and it will also include a copy of the participants guide to help you stay organized throughout our time together.
And I'd like to add it, you're probably used to Zoom, but if it forces you into a full screen, you can minimize the screen. That way, if you want to go with the participants guide on one side of your screen and, excuse me, the presentation or Zoom screen on the other, you can do both.
So we're excited to have you joining us today for the Lead Teacher Collaborative Affinity Group Session 1. We will be showcasing some high impact practices, we'll model strategies, and we'll share resources and highlight ways to facilitate effective teaching and learning, both in the traditional classroom and across various remote learning environments. My name is Linda Stewart, and co-presenting with me this afternoon is Brandy Wilson. Say hello, Brandy.
Hello, it's awesome to see everyone. And Ashley, thanks so much for joining us.
We're glad to have you all with us.
Welcome.
So thank you for participating in our opening prompt. And Brandy has already talked about the ones that are in there. And for those of you who may be a little late, I think Brandy will drop that back in the chat so that you can see what we're talking about. So we asked you to give your name, your school, role, and grade, and 3 words or phrases that you associate with feedback. And we've already looked at those, and we'll be coming back to that at the very end.
And I love, Ashley, that you're from Cloudland. Just to let you know, I'm an Elizabethan native. I know Cloudland is not Elizabethan, but we were close.
Close enough.
Yes.
Cloudland is way up by itself.
It is. And I used to help Mrs. Poston there. Her husband was the pastor of our church, and sometimes I would go in her classroom and help.
I love Miss Poston. She's awesome.
Yay! You'll have to tell her that Brandy said hey.
I sure will.
Awesome. All right, guys, most of us are familiar with Zoom. Like I said before, we have a participants guide. I dropped the bit.ly link in the chat box again. If you didn't get that, just copy and paste. If you want to press escape or hit exit full screen, you can do a dual screen there. Have your participants guide on one side and your Zoom window on the other. That is up to you. It is just a place, the participants guide is just a place for you to jot down notes, to kind of help you stay organized and keep your thinking organized as we move along throughout today's session. Today we will be using the mute button if needed, but we are a small group and we would love for you to feel brave and safe and share with us. And we're so pleased that you already have. And we'll also be using the chat option. All right, so let's get started. Lead Teacher Collaborative. Our Lead Teacher Collaborative is in lieu of our 2 full days that we normally have in the summer, and then throughout with lead teachers throughout the year, we would have separate trainings. And unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we're unable to do that. So we're trying to build a sense of community among our rural life schools. We're wanting to reflect on and share about our rural life work and hear from you all out there in the trenches every day, and definitely get some great ideas to share out. Also, we want to engage in professional learning centered on the key topics aligned to the grant. And as a lead teacher, I hope you're familiar with rural life, melding together personalized learning and research, and just letting you know that we took your feedback in our, I believe it was November meeting, into consideration, strong consideration when we did the Jamboard, and have used that to form these affinity groups. So again, Rural Life supports involvement in the middle grades literacy instruction. And like I said before, it's a literacy, initiative focused on effectiveness, and that's melding together literacy and personalized learning. In November, we met with Leading Edge Learning as lead teachers. In January and February, you have Affinity Group Session 1 and Affinity Group Session 2, and you have chosen to be participants in feedback. February, we will meet with Leading Edge Learning again, and then March and April, we will take feedback from that meeting and personalize that learning for you again in whatever way you see your time to be the most useful, and cover whatever topics are going to be the most useful.
So during November 18th session with Leading Edge, we gathered your responses from the Jamboard activity, and feedback was an area in which some lead teachers expressed a need. Specifically, the lead teachers wanted more information about effective feedback and how to implement that feedback seamlessly into their practice. Please note that this learning was personalized just for you. So for today's session, we will collectively define feedback and look at some of your authentic feedback and analyze its effectiveness. Our session 2 journey will include both tech tools to help streamline feedback, and we will share our own successes and challenges with effective feedback.
I love being able to, for lack of a better term, practice what we preach. And though we, oftentimes you hear you need a personalized learning, but then it's not personalized for us as educators. And how often have you been in a professional learning situation in which you think this is not something I need, or this is not useful to me. So thankful that we're able to take that feedback.
Definitely. So today's objectives are to build a collective definition of effective feedback, to look at the research behind why effective feedback, and to give you time to reflect on your why, and analyze authentic feedback to determine its effectiveness, and craft examples of effective feedback using research best practices. And if you'll notice at the bottom of the screen, you see the bricks, the magnifying glass, and the quilt. The bricks are the icon that go with build a collective definition of effective feedback. So when you see that icon in your upper right-hand screen, you'll know that we're talking about the definition. When you see the magnifying glass, that's when we're analyzing and determining effectiveness of feedback. And when you see the quilt, you'll realize that we are talking about effective feedback, making examples, and deciding what we believe is the best feedback.
And those icons, if you'll watch them throughout the slide deck, you'll see just as a reminder and as a picture action for your brain to remember, oh, we're working on these objectives. So that brings us into what is feedback. Now, the main thing Linda and I talked about planning the 2 sessions, thinking about your responses on the Jamboard, knowing that there was a difference between feedback versus effective feedback, and then also knowing that you had asked for streamlining strategies or simplification and giving feedback. So considering that, we thought in today's session, we would build a strong definition so we would have a shared understanding throughout both sessions of what we feel feedback is. So it's information about how a person is doing as they work towards a goal. It supports the learning process. It also guides students towards new knowledge of increasing skills. And it also helps students identify what they can improve on in order to reach those goals. And you'll see more as we talk throughout this session, some key words in here, such as working towards a goal, learning process, building new knowledge or increasing skills. So note those down and think about those as we move throughout the session.
So let's look at the research. Research says, and notice the bricks at the top right corner, that effective feedback is not advice, praise, or evaluation. So when we're giving feedback, we're not to be the judges, It isn't about being graded. It's to be used to help the students reach their goal. So when feedback is accompanied by a grade, think about what students do with that paper. After a writing assignment that you've given your students and you have, the whatever their grade happens to be, and then you put all this feedback at the top and maybe even inside the paper, what do students usually look at? Well, my experience was that they looked at the grade and didn't go back through and look at any of my feedback.
Exactly.
Exactly, yeah. But the feedback at that point, once the paper's been graded and the grade is in the grade book, the feedback was sort of, I guess, irrelevant to them. So they didn't feel like, well, I've already got a grade. What's the point? So the paper would be tossed aside, the grade would be in the grade book, and then that was the end of it. So when you think about doing it in that manner, it's sort of detrimental to their growth as a learner, because they're only going to see the grade and they're not going to look past that to discover ways that they could improve. Wiggins is an educational guru. He's the author of multiple books and possibly best known for co-authoring Understanding by Design. Says it best when he says feedback is not advice, praise, or evaluation. Feedback is information about how we're doing in our efforts to reach a goal.
I also want to note here, shameless plug, we have another affinity group who is around its curriculum, correct, Linda?
Yes.
2 other coaches, and I'm pretty sure they may be talking about Understanding by Design. So if you're interested in some of Wiggins' other work, feel free to watch that recording. I'd like to build some conversation around something that Linda had brought up when she said feedback accompanied by a grade. What's your experience with that? How do students react to that?
I think the same as she said. Like, if they see the grade, they just see the grade. They don't see even if it's feedback you've left that of things they did well on. They don't even look at that. They just see the grade and move on. So this year I've done a lot more feedback not in their grading, and I've found that they take that a lot better, which kind of goes with what you said. If you're giving them feedback to reach a goal and then grade it, it's much more helpful.
And process. I so agree with that, Anna, and thank you for sharing. Anyone else? I've often found. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Ashley.
Oh, sorry. My phone cut out for a second. So this year we have been mostly virtual. If we haven't been virtual, we've been hybrid. But all of our work is plugged into Canvas. And so no matter what, I'm giving them feedback online. And actually, this is the first time that they have ever really looked at feedback, because normally if I do it on whatever their assignment is that's on paper, like you all said, they look at the grade. And even if it's a bad grade, they don't look at the feedback. They just, okay, whatever. But I feel like with the feedback that I give on Canvas with their assignments, they're kind of forced to look at and then redo, which we've really changed our grading system altogether this year, or we're trying to, but we're having to retrain the way students think about getting a grade versus feedback also. And that's a process in itself too.
Yes, it is. And I'll second that. And note what I was going to say earlier is so often when I talk with teachers about feedback, automatically they think of evaluating or grading. For example, people will say, I'm going to go grade some papers. But what they really mean is I'm going to look through these papers and revise and offer some feedback rather than actually grading them. All right, let's continue with the research.
This next piece of research says that if students know that the classroom is a safe space, then they're more willing to make mistakes and use the feedback for learning. So this goes back to the beginning of year when you set your the stage for your classroom, the climate of your classroom. How do you want it to feel? Do you want them to feel safe to make mistakes and that it's okay? Or is it, no, it's a no mistake zone? You know, just how do the students feel in your classroom when you are giving them feedback? And, you know, and sometimes feedback is oral, it's not always written. And you give them their feedback maybe in front of their peers, and it may be something that they're ashamed to hear, or they didn't want to hear and they're a little embarrassed by. Or positive feedback for some students is also embarrassing. They don't like that praise in front of others.
That
So
attention.
yes. So William, which is best known for his work with formative assessment, says that if students know the classroom is a safe place to make mistakes, they're more likely to use feedback for learning. And that's the objective of feedback, for it to give them direction to help them to learn and to reach the goal that they have made for themselves.
I think one thing to note here is that feedback is not a replacement for student relationships, or if you're like Kayla, not a replacement for work relationships with your colleagues or your teachers. It's because of classroom community that you have strong relationships and that feedback is possible. So it's almost as effective feedback is a byproduct of that strong relationship that you build with your students because you have a safe place for them to learn.
I think, can I add something to that?
Of course, yes.
I think you have to really get in the habit of giving that real specific feedback too. You know, I know that our county a couple of years ago went through this big thing of specific feedback. You know, when I was teaching writing, it would be a habit of mine to walk around and be like, oh, well, that's a good job. You know, you did a good job. You did good.
Exactly.
And I had to consciously just redo the way that I approach the kids with that, and just instead of saying that, oh, well, I really like the way that you wrote that sentence, maybe you could add this, you know, add this on later. But, you know, it was just kind of drilled in our brain to just stop saying good job. So I would be almost afraid to get something other than just specific feedback. So I think a lot of it is we just have to train our brains to, you know, to be more specific to the kids, and then they're used to that. And then when you're giving them more than just a good job, they really listen because they know, okay, well, she's going to tell me something I need to work on or whatever. Yeah. But that's just what comes to my mind when I think about that, because I was just so quick to say, oh, you did a good job, you know, and that's, you try to get away from that. But
we'll look at examples of that. And there have been studies done. And if I could gather it up and bring it really quick, I'd drop it in the chat, but I don't think I can get it while I'm sharing my screen. But all that to say that there have been studies done that show the students' grades, regardless if you're giving that positive affirmation praise or if you're giving the negative, how different and harder they'll work because of that effective feedback, rather than that passive, great job or good job. And I would like to say, even though it's positive as a person, and not all people are like this, but as much as I want Kayla to come by and say, good job, Brandy, but why is it a good job? Because if she likes it, I want to do that again. I want to repeat that action. So if it was that I indented, or that I used a semicolon, whatever that is, I want to repeat that because it was effective in my work. Excuse me.
Okay, the next research that we have is about effective feedback. It's timely, it's ongoing, it's consistent, it's actionable, just to name a few. The 7 keys to effective feedback, which is part of your pre-work Padlet, it had this quote: effective feedback occurs during the learning while there is still time to act on it. And I don't know if any of you are using Amplify as your reading curriculum, but in Amplify, when the students are doing writing, there are examples for teachers as you walk around and observe to give them on the spot feedback. If you see a certain thing happening, then you could direct them in a certain direction and that feedback is extremely helpful. So I just wanted to plug that in there a little bit. So remember that feedback is should be given in the midst of doing the assignment so that they can make corrections. And the last piece of feedback or research is to further expand on these 7 keys, the quote from Brookhart, known for her work in assessment and evaluation, is that students need to know their learning targets. So if you have learner profiles, then you may have targets and goals that your students have set, but they need those learning targets. The specific skill that they're supposed to learn, whatever it happens to be, or else feedback is just someone telling you what to do. And no one really likes to just be told what to do, unless you're me, and I love to be told what to do.
I can follow directions too.
So it needs to be geared toward their target, their goal of something that they're learning. And the students need to be a part of making that goal and realizing whatever it happens to be. If it's to capitalize every beginning letter of a sentence, you know, if that's a failure of theirs, that their goal is to make sure every sentence has a capital letter, for instance, or every sentence has a subject and a predicate, or punctuation, or whatever it happens to be. But they need to know their goal and use that goal as a way to give them feedback so that it's going to help them improve.
So what's our why? Obviously, research is telling us it's effective. So what other rationales do we have? Why should we be using feedback with students? Why should it be an integral part of our professional practice? So if you look at the slide, I'm not going to read it to you. Obviously, you can, but we're looking to increase that student learning, motivation, engagement. Of course, we hear so often that during this time of COVID, that engagement is such a, I hate to say this, but a problem. It's lacking, and teachers are pulling out every trick that they can, learning new technology to help with engagement. So pulling out all the tricks from their hat. So feedback can help with that. Also, we want to help students build on their current knowledge base and make connections with the teacher. But like we said before, this isn't in lieu of strong relationships in classroom community. This is a byproduct of that. So we want to take just a moment to think about you as an educator, or you as in administration. Think about your why. Is your why to increase student learning? Is your why to provide a connection? We have in the participants guide a box for you to jot down your personal reflection. We're going to set a timer for just a couple minutes, 2 to 3 minutes here, to give you a chance to just think about and reflect on what information has been shared with research, or what information has been shared about feedback so far, and your why. Has it changed from when you initially started the session? Are you still in the same frame of mind? I have dropped in the chat box a link to today's participants guide if you didn't get a chance to snag that. So feel free to click that link, jot down on a sheet of paper at your desk, or just think to yourself. But this is your moment. Thank you for taking that moment of reflection. I know a lot of us say it's a safe space, but as a group of colleagues, we've decided that it's a brave space because it sometimes takes courage to share. Does anyone want to share out or feel comfortable sharing out their why and their reflection?
I would like to share mine. I'm Amy Kirk from Del Rio, and mine was to help my students build on their current knowledge base. Unfortunately, I get to teach 2 grade levels and 4 different subjects, but I cannot get my students in 7th grade to understand that had it not been for all of these important people in world history, we would not be where we are today. Talking just, for example, about the Islamic Empire and the Muslim Empire. I know that sometimes that teachers want to skirt around that topic because of the religion aspect of it, but I always try to stress to my students that, you know, we wouldn't have algebra. We would never have had Christopher Columbus had they not invented the astrolabe and taken that from the Greeks. We wouldn't have had the works. And so I try to put that together and present that to my students. You know, there's a reason that we are remembering these people and what they did, because they had a profound effect on what we do today. And that's a struggle for me because, unfortunately, and Miss Linda knows because she's my coach, that 7th grade, it doesn't matter what I do. I mean, you know, I try to get excited. I'm trying everything from here to Timbuktu and back, but it's just not happening. It's just not happening because their interest in social studies and English language arts is at a negative. You send them to math, they're all over it. I don't know if it's me. I don't know if it's the content. This is my 7th year teaching, and this is the first year that I have ever had students that truly disliked social studies.
Ooh, I love social studies. I taught that as well, Amy, ELA and social studies. And thank you for being brave and sharing. And yes, I love how you said making those connections to build upon what they already know, that prior knowledge and that feedback and rationale that you offer them, and being directive is a huge help. And maybe talking next session. So this session, building that foundation and that shared understanding, and maybe a next session when we talk about some tech tools and some streamlining and things of that nature, it'll help build that feedback or your feedback repertoire, and then possibly leverage that engagement opportunity. So that's what we're hoping for. That's what we're hoping for. Thank you for sharing again, Amy. All right, folks, so let's do this. Keeping your why in mind, keeping the reasoning we talked about, the research behind feedback. What is feedback to you? Think about it in general and think about it in this COVID world. And thus far, has your thinking or your personal definition changed? Why do you feel feedback is the most effective? And when we share a definition with you, I want you to think about words to keep possibly, or words that you might want to trash from the definition. And so we're going to do a little activity on Jamboard. If you're not familiar with Jamboard, we'll go through it quickly. I'm going to drop the link in the chat box. But on Jamboard, you will see the Webster's definition for feedback. I'll bring that up on my screen as well. So I want you to please choose a box. Go ahead and type your name in the box. I think we do have 4 participants. Perfect. I thought that's what we were going to have today, so we framed it with that in mind. So go ahead and type your name in one of the boxes. Choose one. You can respond when we give you directions by adding a sticky note. So you can press the sticky note, type in what you'd like to say, hit save, and move that, manipulate it wherever you'd like. You may resize it, you may turn it if you're getting fancy, or you may delete it. You can also just add a text box into your box and type away. But what we would like you to do is, looking at that definition, the transmission of evaluative or corrective information about an action, event, or process to the original or controlling force. How do you feel about feedback? Is this gauged to education? Do we need to make it more fitting for education? Do we need to change things based on the learning we've just gone through, on the research and the whys? And our, what could we say? We've not gone through the other definitions yet, but so the reasoning and the research, why do you feel that this is a good or not good definition of feedback? We're going to give you a couple minutes to go ahead and jot that down.
Brandy, when we click the link, it's not letting us go to it. I don't know. It's telling me I don't have access to it. So I
Okay, then that's me. Give me 1 second here and I will change that now. And let's see, you may have to put it right back in.
That's what mine is doing, but somehow I've managed to click out of everything and all I can see is your all's faces and I have no clue of how to get back to anything. I'm so not Zoom techie.
No, that is okay. Girls, that is, we all know we're doing the best we can. Let me put this link right back in. See, Kayla, if that will pop up the chat again.
The only way that I can see the screen that you shared is to click in the top right-hand corner of the box and it says swap screen with video or something. All I can see is everyone's beautiful faces.
What if you hit escape? Or is it just, you can't see the shared screen, you just see the faces?
Yeah, well, oh, wait, I think it came back. Everybody went away, but you're back now. Okay. Technical difficulties. It's been a long day.
Gotta love it.
Well, Linda and I have been laughing at ourselves because we've been trying to figure out, like, to save paper, how can we look at our notes? How can we do 2 screens rather than 1? And as we were practicing, it was funny. So we certainly understand.
Okay. Well,
is everybody in? Were you able to get access?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
But I don't remember what you said to do now. I was trying to open it and it wouldn't work.
No problem. I was trying to do 2 things at once, so it came off a little confusing anyways. Thank you, Anna. Okay, what we'd like you to do is look at this definition from Webster of feedback right there in the middle. Is this fitting for education? Is it geared towards education? Based on some of the reasons and the research that we've shared, how could we tweak or change this to make it more educator friendly? What are some words that you might keep and what are some words that you might trash? And feel free to go ahead and, like I said, you can just click or hover and click and type your name there in the box and claim a box. And then you can use sticky notes. There's pictures. There's a text box as well. I love seeing this learning pop up. I love Jamboard as a tool.
Okay, so I'm doing this on my phone because my son has an orthodontist appointment.
Oh, no problem.
And I cannot figure out how to work the tools. I'm in here and I see everybody typing everything, but all I can do is write with a pen, and I can't write that tiny with my big old finger.
I understand. I'm happy to type in for you, or you can just share with us. Go ahead and share out.
Okay, so I think somebody might have said this, but I would remove evaluative because I don't know if kids see that, they're like, they're not always going to think of that positively. She's grading me on this, again, back to the grading thing. So that's what I was thinking. That's all. Still trying to figure out how to work this.
Oh, that's fine. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. I typed it in. Is this
Thank
Ashley?
you. Yes, this is Ashley.
Okay. Thank you, Ashley, for sharing. All right, so we've got lots of people remove evaluative. We kind of came to that shared understanding that feedback is just that feedback, and it's not a tool to evaluate or grade. I love, we have a couple people saying, take out that controlling force. Why do you want to take that term, that term out? Anyone want to share?
Sorry, I'm trying to get my stuff in line over here. I still couldn't hit my mute button. I just didn't like the way that's worded. I don't like the way that sounds. I don't like the way that it's worded. And I mean, I think leaving the original where it just says process of the original, like original force or something like that. I just didn't like the word controlling. There's just something about it that I didn't feel like it fit in that definition.
Very negative connotation, right?
Yeah.
If I feel like you're controlling me, I don't want to take feedback from you. And it sounds more evaluative, and it's also just such a negative connotation, and it's overbearing seemingly.
Yes.
And so as a student, it makes me want to buck almost. Tell me I can't do something, and I'm like, oh, well, we'll see. I like that.
For me, I also said to remove controlling because I felt like that put our students into a box. I know that my daughter was telling me a story about someone that she works with in Atlanta, Georgia, and she came here from a foreign country. And she said, I don't know anything about your country. She said, can you tell me about your, what's the word I'm thinking? How you adjusted, how it's different here than it is in Korea. And the first thing that the student talked about in the education system and her experience was how that in the United States, they're allowed to have creativity. In Korea, they nix that from the get-go.
Oh, so that freedom to be creative rather than being controlled.
Yes, that was my purpose for wanting to remove that.
I'm with you. I appreciate that a ton, because we do need, every student is on a different level. And to accommodate that, feedback is a good way in which we can accommodate that, but we're not going to act like that's not frustrating or at some points difficult. But it is nice to be able to take off that controlling force and sometimes see yourself as a facilitator of the learning rather than a controller of the learning. Well, thank you so much for sharing in our Jamboard. I am, if you'll give me 1 second, going to update our slide deck to reflect on some of the things that were shared. And here we go. All right, so as a group definition, we have said it's not evaluative, corrective information, and some of us liked corrective, some of us wanted to trash. It is a process. I loved, whomever added this, relevant to student learning and outcomes. We want to yield an immediate outcome with our students. We want to see progress and learning, and I am drawing a blank at the word I want, but we want to see proof and action that the students are learning. So I loved that relevant to student learning and outcomes was really resonated with me. All right, we're going to talk about now some tools. So we've got this shared understanding. We've got a shared definition of what we feel feedback is. So as we go in session 2 and throughout the rest of this session, we have a consensus on what we believe and our feelings. So if we're going to evaluate some feedback, we also need that shared understanding and shared tools and how we're going to do so.
So in order for us to engage in some authentic examples of feedback to be effective, to strengthen examples, we need a shared understanding of what effective feedback should entail. So we're going to use the team rubric and the research and definition and all of our reasoning with that, and look at specifically at this. If we are being evaluated and we want to be able to get a 5, then the educator, this is one of the points on the evaluation, is to give feedback. So feedback is frequent, high quality, and academically focused, given during guided practice and homework review, and it should be personalized to the student. The teacher uses student feedback to guide next steps for instruction. And note in the last bullet, the teacher is empowering the students to give feedback to one another. And we'll talk more about the types of feedback when we go to our next session.
Another tool that we're going to be using to evaluate feedback is something that was referenced earlier in the session, as well as on your pre-work Padlet, which is the work of Wiggins, which is the 7 keys to effective feedback, which states it should be goal reference, tangible, actionable, user-friendly, timely, ongoing, as well as consistent. Also on your pre-work Padlet was the Education Hub video, in which it talked about what we call, Linda and I are deeming the 3 F's and the 3 P's. The 3 stages of feedback: feed up, feed back, and feed forward, as well as the 3 operations of feedback, which means you could be in the product, process, or personal level. So let's get started. Woohoo! So we're going to be looking at viral feedback and outtake roll feedback. So hashtag awesome or hashtag cut. In the chat box, we're going to look at, in the chat box, we ask or request that you rate this feedback example with either hashtag awesome or hashtag cut. In doing so, we will look at the pieces of feedback that are in our outtake roll in order to hopefully move them to our viral box. And then discuss a little bit what makes our hashtag awesome feedback just that, awesome, and why it would go viral. So again, hashtag awesome, hashtag cut is requested for you to type into the chat box as we look at each piece of feedback and evaluate using the tools we just discussed.
So our first piece of feedback, I need to give you a little background information. So students were given an assignment in Achieve 3000. They were instructed to write at least a paragraph to a question after reading an article. They were instructed to follow the CER paragraph frame using a claim, evidence, and reasoning. And this was during an argumentative writing, so they'll introduce the counterclaim later. After students completed the assignment, the teacher was able to view not only their writing, but also different color highlighting for evidence and annotating that was part of their assignment. Her highlighting color is always green to give feedback. She was able to highlight anything they didn't as part of the CER assignment to help scaffold them to correct or to add any highlighting they didn't use, and also add comments to perfect their writing for an assignment later in the unit. So, highlight in a different color anything the student did not highlight as a way to scaffold for an assignment and attach feedback. Would that be hashtag awesome or hashtag cut?
You should feel so empowered right now.
Yes.
Anna, let's hear your reasoning.
Well, I struggled a little bit with this. I think it would have been okay if she was doing it during the activity. She made it sound like she did it afterwards. And so then I felt like, well, that's not going to be beneficial for them because they're just going to see a bunch of highlights in green and they're not going to understand why she might have done that.
I like your thinking. Amy says also cut because it's not specific. Trying to see what else we have. One thing that I thought of, and you know, there's context with everything, but if the teacher is doing all the highlighting and correcting, then they're doing the learning rather than attempting to have the students check their own work. And that may be something this person did. That was just something I thought of.
Well, and piggyback off that, if she's highlighting everything they did wrong, they can't redo it to correct it. So then your feedback would be pointless too, because they can't work to achieve and get better at it.
So again, not the process. It's almost too late afterwards because it's not helping cut, because it's not helping with the teacher doing the work. Kind of my thinking, Ashley, that's where I was too, that if the teacher's doing the work, which again, we have no real life view, or we're not a fly on the wall, but just this small snippet of what's happening, we can share our thoughts. Thank you so much. Think about the 3 R's. Is it feed up, feedback, or feed forward? And if you recall, feed up was clear learning goals, establishing those learning goals. Feedback was monitoring the progress. And then feed forward was offering next steps.
I guess it would be feed forward because she's trying to prepare them for the next activity or what they're preparing to do later on in their writing.
I agree. That was my thinking as well. All right. Linda, feedback number 2.
Number 2, you need more examples in your report. Do you think that is a hashtag awesome or a hashtag cut?
Seeing some hashtag cut. What examples? Not specific. Too general. Is this feedback or is this advice? This is advice, folks. Unless it's preceded by some sort of descriptive feedback, the natural response of the student is going to be to wonder, why are you suggesting this? What examples? Where should I put these? Maybe be more specific. What's something we could say?
Maybe something that, like if you were using text, maybe something they would need to look for in the text to support their reasoning of the report.
I like that. Support that. Show me some text evidence, specific. Or in this paragraph, I need you to have another example to support this thought. Or you need more examples in your report to persuade your reader to vote for your candidate. So we have talked about what this example needs to increase its effectiveness. So let's go to feedback 3.
Feedback 3, good job, nice work, way to go, superb, awesome. I'm so pleased with your work. Hashtag awesome, hashtag cut.
Amy, I loved what you put. Direct the student to specific paragraphs in their writing in the text for our last feedback. I agree with that. Anna, but it does feel so good. It feels so good. Pat on the back.
Yep.
This is evaluation, guys, not feedback. They make a value judgment. Good job, nice work, way to go. That's a value judgment. They're rating or evaluating or praising what was done. And even though, as Anna says, it feels good, hashtag feels good, there's really no actionable feedback here. There's no information about what occurred. from the student's perspective, we only know that someone being our teacher or someone being our administrator, as from the perspective of the teacher, either placed a high or low value on what we did. How could we change this? And folks, I want to say we might go about 5 minutes over. If you need to specifically leave at 4:30, we honor your time, but it looks like we may go about 5 minutes over. So back to what I said, how could we change this? Any of these? That was Jack. That's Linda's new baby.
You need to add something specific that they did well on, like, good job. You found that the best piece of evidence in that paragraph that you could use to support what you were discussing.
Support your claim. I like that. Very specific. Directive. Good work. Your use of words was more precise in this paper than your last one, perhaps. And I can see the scenes clearly in my mind's eye. That's specific. It's okay to say good job. It's okay to say good work. This goes back full circle to what Kayla brought up at the beginning of our session. Right, moving on.
Number 4, I was confused about who was talking in the dialogue you wrote in this paragraph. Hashtag awesome or hashtag cut? And I forgot to put a period at the end of the sentence.
Oh, how dare you, Miss
Sorry.
Linda.
Linda, I like your sentence, but next time maybe try putting a period there.
Kayla, I love it. Way to leverage that feedback opportunity. I like to cut unless the teacher wrote it directly across from that specific paragraph. Not sure which paragraph. I see what you're saying. Is it right there beside of it saying this is the paragraph, or was it just at the end of the entire paper? How do I correct? So we're talking about the process here, and they need to be able to act on it. I'm in between on this one. It could be hashtag awesome or cut. It is I love how it's zoomed in on one paragraph, so they're not overloading the student. You want to think about what feedback would yield the most immediate result for and leverage the highest outcome for students. Did I say that correctly? So we're looking for the best gain in knowledge or gain in learning. And so narrowing it down is great, but we also, if we're going to narrow it down, we have to pick what feedback would yield the best result. It is user-friendly because it says, I'm confused about who was talking in this dialogue. How could we change that? What would you change to add to it? Kayla, I agree, not particularly awesome, but it's more specific. This is one that I would have put in hashtag awesome. How do I correct, though, back to what Anna said? I do understand that. Thanks for sharing those thoughts. Let's move on.
Feedback number 5, you did that wrong. This is a weak paper. You got a C on your evaluation. I'm disappointed with your poster.
The I'm disappointed goes back to being a parent. I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
Yeah. Hashtag awesome or hashtag cut?
Only negatives. We have feedback example 3 who made me feel good. And then now I'm thinking, what has happened? Hashtag cut, folks. This is a value judgment. It's not feedback. Again, it's evaluation, just like feedback 3. Though feedback example 3 was praise and positive affirmations, it doesn't take back the fact that there is little or no feedback offered here. It is, again, rating or evaluating or praising what was done. There's nothing for students to act upon. And again, we know now that someone else just doesn't like the work we did, but why? Why is it a weak paper? And how did I do that wrong? I can't fix anything. So how can we change this? Can we give negative feedback? Yes. As long as it's just prescriptive or descriptive in order for the students to act on it. What could we add to this? Ooh, Amy, wow. Talking about classroom community and building that and thinking about how feedback can leverage relationships and community. I love that Amy shared, you have alienated your student into thinking he or she is a failure. So you're getting the opposite effect of what you're hoping for.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking maybe you could say constructive criticism. Yes, Ashley, is great. So you could say this is a weak paper. Almost from the first sentence, I was confused to your initial thesis and evidence that you provided for it. Possibly the second paragraph started a new thesis. And in the third paragraph, there's no evidence, just beliefs. Even though that may hurt, it's facts. And it's pushing them, that constructive criticism, to move forward. It gives them something to act upon and to correct. All right, feedback example 6.
I feel your lesson was interactive, well-paced, and engaging for the students. Hashtag awesome or hashtag cut?
Linda and I were also on the hashtag awesome train for this one. It is affirming, but also notes specific areas in which the teacher performed highly. One argument that we thought participants might have is how was it interactive? Maybe more specific there. How, what was engaging? So maybe more specific there. But the fact that it was specific in the sense of telling them what areas they did well goes back to they didn't just make me feel good like example 3 did. I feel good for a reason because my lesson was interactive, so therefore my students were engaged. My lesson was well-paced and interactive, so again students were engaged. So because of the interactive and well-paced lesson, it yielded a result of engagement for students. All righty, thanks so much for choosing or for having that shared understanding of feedback, for building a definition, and for evaluating feedback. We want you to think about that as you move forward into session 2, but we want you to think back to the beginning.
So let's go full circle. So in the very beginning, we asked you, as you were signing on, to give us 1 to 3 words or phrases that you associated with feedback. So now that we've gone through this session, how has your thoughts about feedback changed? Or maybe they've stayed exactly the same. Or would you want to tweak what you said?
We have, informative, helpful, memorable, immediate, positive, useful, often goes unread, helpful, quick, positive. On time, timely, yes. Specific is a good word there, and constructive. When people shared positive earlier with their 3 words or phrases, it made me think constructive criticism is okay and can also yield that student learning.
Mm-hmm.
Detailed, yes. I would definitely, after looking into this further, would think actionable, transferable. Thank you, folks, for sharing and that reflection. I gave more evaluative praise statements at the beginning of session. Be specific about what I'm addressing. And I think it goes back to exactly what Kayla was sharing at the beginning. It sure makes you feel good when you go by and say, that's a great paper, good sentence. But why is that a great paper? All right, folks, what is coming up? Prep for next time. We have a bridge to practice activity for you to do, and it's actually a feedback audit. So we've given you some tools, a shared definition, and some tools and a shared definition in order to evaluate some feedback today. So we would like you to, in a sense, audit or evaluate yourself. If you'll see here on my screen, it's going to force you to make a copy. But this is your bridge to practice. This is what we would like you to do for our next session. Please take the time to tally some feedback given during your instruction. We want you to notice, is it teacher to student feedback? Is it student to student or student to teacher feedback? And just choose maybe one day, one specific lesson, and just carry this on a clipboard and think about what kind of feedback you gave. It could be, you could spread it across a couple lessons or a couple days. Then choose another day or another lesson, and we want you to pick a couple examples of feedback that you did give that were teacher to student, or that were student to student, or was student to teacher. And think about, did I, as an educator or administrator, touch on Wiggins 7 keys? And where was my feedback operating? Was it on task level, process level, or personal level? And then our hope is that you'll write a reflection here at the bottom and say, you know, maybe I realized that I gave lots of personal feedback that wasn't very actionable, or it wasn't goal referenced. So using this as a tool just to audit your professional practice. All right, you can reach that by the QR code. We will also put the link in the chat box, and it is also available, or will be available, on the bit.ly site that was shared earlier. Looking into what's coming up next, today we have just finished the Affinity Group Session 1, and Session 2 is coming up on February 10th. For Affinity Group 1, which is again is feedback. And notice on February 24th, you have a session with Leading Edge Learning again. And then we will take your feedback from that session and create other affinity groups for the March and April sessions. We also have a survey that we would love for you to take. You can use a QR code here, or I will be dropping the link in the chat box. We would like your reflections. We're always looking for areas to improve. We want to know your insights, potential topics that you would like to hear discussed during future lead teacher collaborative sessions. And like we said, it's about a minute, if that, to fill out. All right, Miss Linda, do you want to close us out?
Yes, thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for your participation, and it was just nice to get to see some of you and meet some new people, and I hope that you feel the same with the people that you've met today, and that you'll be able to then maybe connect with them if you have questions as we go through this. It says in the chat that they're not able to.
I see that. I'm working on that right now.
All righty. So once you have the survey completed, then that will conclude our session for today, and we look forward to seeing you February 10th.
Folks, thanks so much for joining us today. Right now, I am looking at the Google Doc and making sure that you have access. And if you want to try that link again, it should work, but I will also add it to the chat.
Yeah, it worked now. Thank you.
Yay, perfect. Thank you for your patience and grace on that. I appreciate that. And thank you so much. We try our best to honor your time, and thank you for allowing us that few minutes to go over. So just like we said, as soon as you're ready, you're welcome to sign off. And again, all of our best to you, and we will see you